Hey guys, Rob from Georgia here with you, aka VHS82 apostrophe, with another episode in my ongoing X-Files, a closer look. Season 2, episode 12, Aubrey. We are halfway through another season already. Remarkably. Directed by Rob Bowman, written by Sara B. Cooper. This marks the first episode in the new year, so 1995. First X-Files drops January 6th. And I guess among, Terry O'Quinn, and he plays Lieutenant Tillman. If you don't recognize that name, he was Agent Michaud in the X-Files Fight the Future. And apparently I think he's in another episode as well. So he's connected to 3 stories in the X-Files, but as far as I know, it's all different characters, which is still interesting. Getting to see him up close in this episode, it does sort of expand a little bit, even if not technically. It does expand on him as a character a little bit in the little bit we get in Fight the Future, which is, a little fun. They may not really necessarily be connected character-wise, but, just to see him act, I guess. Okay, this is an interesting episode, man, with a little bit of a nod to some gialli, I think. And I'll get into that, I hope, if I don't forget. Interesting story. I really appreciated this one. Rewatching it this morning in the darkness of my movie room with my little one, came in with me this morning, and this one's a little tough for a little one to be watching, and I was sort of I was struggling with that a little bit, but in the end I just I just let it roll. My kids are smart enough to know the difference between film and reality, so still got to temper these things a little bit. I mean, it's only 6, but anyways, this is an interesting story, and I really fell into this one this morning more than even the previous revisit earlier in the week. I have a set of murders, and from 2 different time periods, and they seem to be, ultimately, we find out that they are connected, but connected in a really interesting way. We meet Terry O'Quinn, who plays our Lieutenant Tillman, of course, and the girl, Deborah Strang, who plays Detective B.J. Morrow, or Betty June. That's a bit of a throwback to the 50s, which almost seems appropriate, considering what we'll learn about her as the episode rolls on. But we find out early on that her and Tillman are having an affair. We find out that she's pregnant. And we find out that maybe this pregnancy ultimately is a catalyst for some emerging genetic memories that will have an interesting, I'm just going to get into the spoilers. I'm not going to really be too concerned about it. It's a TV show from 1995, for crying out loud. But it is interesting. I was, when we find out the reveal that she is actually the killer, there is a moment where several times the weapon is a straight razor, and at one point when she is attacking someone, it's sort of a shock reveal when you see it for the first time. So I hope I didn't ruin it for anyone, but there's a bit of a gialli in the sense that at times you see, at one time you see her hand gloved, but in a yellow, and really giallo is yellow, right? For the word yellow, and so there seems to be a bit of a nod in that direction, and even at the point where her hand is straight up with a razor, I mean, you just kind of get a sense of some early Argento films or other films, and so there seems to be, but I have not read this anywhere, so it's kind of funny that no one, at least that I've seen, picked up on that little bit of a nod. But I found that kind of fascinating. But genetic memory. So you have Coghill, who's this guy. He's old now. He was just recently released in, I think it was, I want to say it was 93, released from prison in 93 maybe. Did his time for rape, and assault. Also, I think, I can't remember if they nabbed him for murder or not. There are murders that take place, but I don't think they connected him with those murders, even though the word sister was razor bladed into the chest deep, so it kind of hits into the rib cage. I don't think they connected the two, but he ultimately did go to prison for his rape and near Miss Thibodeau, elderly lady now, but she was the victim that got away from him. And he is the reason why she's the reason why he ended up in prison for all these years. So, ultimately the arrow gets pointed at him pretty quick, but he is on an oxygen machine. He's in the 70s, and so, how is he supposed to be committing these murders? And how they get connected is interesting. We're with when we're with in the beginning with BJ and Tillman. She wants to talk about the pregnancy, and so he agrees to meet her at a hotel that night. Well, she arrives there before him, and something snaps inside, and she suddenly is plunged into a vision, which without her realizing or where she's even going, she ends up out in the middle of a field digging up the skeletal remains of an agent who was lost. I want to say it was back in 1942. Agent Sam Chaney and Tim and Ledbetter are two agents that went missing. Well, they become victims, of course, of our killer. At least in that time period, the genetic memory is implanted from him. Miss Thibodeau will have the baby. It is a boy, and she'll give him up for adoption. She doesn't want to keep, just because, it's a rape and the memory and everything like that. You can understand. But she chooses to keep the baby, in the sense of having the baby. And the baby seemingly grows up and has a normal life, is a police officer. But his daughter, BJ, who's carrying the genetic memory, who is the one sort of skips a generation, right? And lands on her. And so, but it's sort of a confusing thing, and it works well, but she doesn't realize she is committing these murders. She's investigating the murders along with Tillman, but she doesn't realize who she is, or that she's even, so it has sort of a weird, it's sort of a gray fuzzy area. I'm not gonna say it's supernatural, but there is a bit of a twinge of that in this episode. I almost kind of wish they would have taken that a little further. But when you get to the end, and ultimately she starts retracing her, I guess it's her grandfather's steps, and trying to finish the job, beginning with Miss Thibodeau, who realizes that's her granddaughter, right? And there's a lot of just interesting thoughts and memories that are emerged genetically, that come to light. And it's just, I don't know, it's an interesting episode. There's a lot. If you just sort of casually watch it and just move on to the next thing, you kind of lose a lot of what's, there's a lot happening underneath the choices we make, and are we compelled to make those choices, and how much is genetically driven? Do we have a say about it? In terms of, are we born evil versus, nurture versus nature, right? The Michael Myers of Carpenter versus the Michael Myers of Rob Zombie. I think there's a role, they both have a role to play. It matters how you raise, but you can overcome how you're raised. We see it over and over and over. Can you overcome what you're born with? I think you can. I think that's where being raised well can help overcome any disadvantage there may be, perhaps genetically. I'm not an expert in these things, but I do believe in man's inherent free will, our ability to choose and to rise above, and to push forward what is good within us, and not necessarily gravitate to the bad. And here in this episode, it almost seems to argue she really had no control over her genetic compulsion that was rooted in her, what was passed down genetically to her. She really had no ability to fight it, although in the end she'll make a decision. She'll make a decision or two, to that sort of shows her free will, but then again, she's under the, the compulsion of her genetics. And one wonders if her pregnancy isn't what the catalyst for it. It's got some interesting ideas about things that are passed down generationally, and the sins of the father coming back around, and ultimately Coakley will his sin will truly come back full circle on him, even though by man's standard he paid his debt to society, if you want to call it that. His sin still comes home, and the choices he makes. And it's funny because there are moments in here where you almost wonder, does he regret what he did? Does he, is he remorseful, repentant of the choices of the things that he did, killing and attacking? And there is a bit of a fright in his face in the end when he's faced with what he has spawned, which takes 2 generations, but it comes back around on him. And so I found it very fascinating. It was a really interesting episode. And then, of course, the whole adultery committed with a marriage. How was all that going to be ultimately dealt with? But ultimately, I think in the end, we find out that Tillman has offered to adopt the baby, knowing that it's his. Oh, and so you wonder how that works out with his wife and that aspect of their relationship, which you never even meet his wife. You don't even know who she is or how that relationship is, although I'm sure it comes, as a pretty rude shock. Oh, by the way, I had an affair with somebody at the office, and we got a baby, and I'm adopted, and because she was a psychotic killer. And yeah, I mean, that's the kind of stuff you want to come home and talk about with your better half. So anyway, so this, so it was fun. It was a fun episode. The next few I noticed, looking are rather dark episodes. You got Irresistible, which is the follow-up to God, what was his name? The guy who robs the caskets and stuff. That's gonna be fun. I'm not even gonna try German word, but apparently it's a village, it's a town with a group of Satanists and murders, and it's kind of dark. Fresh Bones. It's a few dark episodes coming up. Ought to be interesting. I'm looking forward to revisiting. Although I did revisit Irresistible not too long ago. It's that one is interesting because by the end you have a sense that Scully is in real trouble. And she just really shows it really great. And in fact, in this episode, Aubrey, at the end, our killer has a razor to Mulder's throat, and he is somewhat visibly shaken by that, and Scully is left holding him, and he's fine, but he's shaken, and it's not the first or the last time we will see our principal characters held by another in just being comforted and just embraced and held, and just gotta love it. I was thinking some of the facial expressions in this one, there are times when Mulder just sort of carries or holds this look, and it just cracks you up, man, because it's so freaking good. A lot of, even Terry O'Quinn had some moments in here, and Coakley, the guy who plays Coakley, I didn't write his stupid name down, but the guy who plays the elderly Coakley did a really good job on this. So maybe the writing could have been just a little bit tighter, but I thought it was pretty good. I enjoyed it. And for episode 12, first one of the year 1995, we continue to roll on into the second half of season 2, and eventually we'll be already talking about season 3. Go figure, man. Time is flying pretty quickly. So anyways, as always, we end these things off with Go Bills.
This is not a dream. Not a dream.
We might be useful to you.